Okay, so let's take a look at how you can create a virtual network in Microsoft's Azure. Right, so basically, first thing we are going to do is we are going to log into Azure. Now, where exactly we are using virtual network is in scenarios like, let's say, virtual machine, setting up VPS, setting up some of the services where you would be making use of virtual network. Okay, so what we will do is we will go to Microsoft Azure portal, then click on all services. Now here we will be finding virtual network which we will be using, right? So within network, check the network from left hand sidebar. Here you can see virtual network, right? So what we will do is we will click on it. If you have used any other services, you will have at least one virtual network in the work. Okay, so if you want to get rid of that, simply click on that particular virtual network and you can click on delete. So based on if there are no services making use of it, it will be deleted. Otherwise it will be throwing an error that someone is using this virtual network, right? So this was the deletion part. So our goal is to create a virtual network. Now let me refresh and you will find that eventually this will be removed. Cache makes it stay a bit longer here. Now the thing is, here you see the virtual network. We can click new by clicking on create. Now here you will see the project subscription and the resource group. Project subscription is something you can use pay as you go or free trial. Then comes your resource group. So I'm choosing one of the resource group here and it has instance. We are going to name that, right? So let's say I will name this my virtual net and it has its region selected by default for you. If you want, you can change that to something recommended or you can keep it as is. Now the next thing is finding out the IP addresses. Okay, so here you see the IP range and here one IP is already added and you can find option to add IPv6 space as well. Simply click on enable and add that particular IP address space. Now here you will notice that the range we have already set here from 10.0.0.0.16 and onwards, right? So that range and then comes the subnet, right? So by default there is one given to you, but you can also manually add one by clicking on add subnet. In the right hand drawer you will find subnet name option. You can type my subnet or some specific name, set the range, then set the NAT giveaway. Okay, so basically currently don't have anything specified here, so you will have to set one. There is also endpoint option where you can see the amount of services you can set it for, right? So based on that this subnet will be in use. Then click on add and it will get added to that virtual network. Now the next thing would be security, where you can see option to enable disable bastion host, right? So basically it is a way for your virtual network to connect to your platform as service or similar other virtual services. Now the next option after bastion host is denial of service network protection. Can enable disable this. I know my resource ID. You can click and then further edit, right? So I'm keeping some of these disabled just to show you a demo of virtual network, right? So next thing would be choosing the firewall. You can enable this, give the firewall name, address spaces, your own public address being whitelisted. You can also add your addresses within create new option, right? And you can see can be associated with this firewall, right? So these are some of the things you can do in security side. Then comes our tags. So as far as tags are concerned, I'm not much of a leaning towards them because I mostly use it for testing. But for those who are working and managing variety of business resources, you can use tags, filter out the resources and categorize them. So that's one way. Then comes review and create. So finally, when we reach here, it will go through a validation and it needs to be passed. So all the options that you select at the start needs to be passed before we can create our virtual network, right? So make sure all the options that you choose, you can go through them, right? And you can also take a look at all the security tags, IP address that you can select. You can also go back and enable disable if required. Then again the validation will go through all the options and it will pass or fail based on that, right? So as you can see, I have went through all the options here, and what I will do from this point onwards is clicking on create. Now that I have clicked on create and virtual network is created, my next option would be to explore the deployment, right? So it will take a bit of time for this virtual network to process, and once processed I'll be able to access that. Then we will take a look at some of the internal options of that virtual network. Now here you see our deployment is complete. I can go ahead and click go to resource. Now this will have its own dashboard like this. Now here you see your address space, then you can use the DNS provided by Azure for time being. You can also enter your own DNS and then manage from there, right? For now we will just explore our features. So we will specifically take a look at settings part, right? So here you see settings where you see address spaces whitelisted. So this was the part we already done during the setup. You can additionally add more IP address range, right? Then there is connected devices. So your virtual network will be connected through range of services like your Linux VM or Windows VM. And during the creation, you can specifically assign that virtual network as well. Same happens with subnet. So whenever you select your device, it will be making use of subnet as well, where you have your own IPv4 v6 range and range of available IPs, right? Then comes bastion. So I think I need to cover this separately. So it will be a good option to create a bastion if you are making use of your virtual network for any specific set of VM creation, and let's say for services where you are using virtual network and you want it not much exposed to the outside IP ranges or outside attacks. So in that case, having a bastion, having DDoS protection, firewall is necessary. So from security standpoint, you should think of creating bastion. So this setting for bastion, here you can deploy that. You can also configure manually, right? Here you can see bastion pricing start with hourly base rate. So keep that in mind that it would cost you, right? So it's not like attached to your any base free services. Next comes DDoS protection. Like I mentioned before, you want to protect your virtual network, then bastion, DDoS and firewall is something you need to protect from outside attacks. Right now the next is firewall. Just like DDoS, you can enable this service as well. Currently there is no firewall that exists. I will have to create a new firewall, then add for this virtual network. Similarly, there is also Defender for cloud. So this service is available in variety of ranges. Some are free services for specific service, like say for Azure directory you may find Defender having support for free, but in some other services you will find that there is a charge, and you can find that in right hand side. So for example, here you see storage account $10, your SQL servers 15, and container 7, keywords being 2 cents or so, and so on. You can upgrade your existing plan to go there, right? So let's go back to overview and let me check other options. Network manager. So let's take a look at that. So here you can create your own network manager. You can manage your network services in a single place. From this point onwards, you can configure some of the connections. You can manage your admin from here as well. Now there is also DNS server that I mentioned. Currently it is provided by Azure. If I want to set my own, I will click on custom, then I will add IP address, then save it and proceed ahead, right? So for now we are letting Azure to handle all of this, right? So these are some of the things you can do. There is also peering option, so you can click on add and it will let you add the peering, right? So you can add link name, you can allow disallow based on your rules, and then finally click on add, right? So these are some of the things we can do. There is also endpoint option. So let's say there is service endpoint and private endpoint, both you can check from here. In case of private endpoint, you don't seem to be getting much option other than viewing here and refreshing it. You can also set the properties for this. However, this is more for copying and pasting, and so these text fields are allowed here for that reason. Then finally comes the log for your virtual network as well. You can click on add and you will notice log name, log type and notes, right? So you are pretty much done on that part, right? So these are some of the settings that I wanted to show you while creating the virtual network.